So we can say that metals, they ionize by losing their valence electron. So I can simply say that they ionize by losing their valence electrons. So elements that are able to ionize by losing their valence electrons. For example, in this case, when you look at maybe Na, that is sodium, that sodium can become a sodium ion because it has lost an electron. So that is what we are talking about. So usually metals ionize by losing their valence electron. That is what you need to remember. So let's talk about briefly what we are calling as being the physical. So the physical properties. So the physical properties of metals. Physical properties of metals. So what are some of the physical properties of metals that you need to remember that they are going to be asking you in the exam? Well, you need to remember that metals are good conductors of heat and electricity. So we can simply say that they are good conductors. So they are good conductors of heat and electricity. Now in the exam, they can ask you why are metals good conductors of heat and electricity. It is because of what we are calling as being, deionized, electrons. Delocalized. So there's what we call delocalized electrons. So when we talk about delocalized electrons, these are simply free electrons that are found in a metal lattice. So because of these delocalized electrons or free electrons that are found within the metal lattice, that makes metals to be good conductors of heat as well as electricity. Another property that we can state or that you need to remember is that metals are malleable. So metals are malleable. Now, what do we mean when we say that metals are malleable? So metals are malleable. In other words, we are talking about the property of malleability. That is what we can say. Well, when we say that metals are malleable, we mean that they can be hammered and made into different, shapes. So that simply means that they can be hammered. So they can be hammered and made into different shapes. So that is what we mean. So they can tell you metals are malleable. What does that mean? So the property of malleability, of being malleable, means that they can be hammered, they can be flattened so that they can be made into different shapes. Another property that we can talk about is that metals are malleable. So we can say that metals are ductile, because we talked about malleable. So metals are ductile. Now, what do we mean when we say that metals are ductile? Well, it simply means that they can be drawn into wires. So they can be drawn into wires. Think of the wires that you see, in the overhead electric cables for ZESCO or in your home. All the wires that you are able to see, it is because metals are ductile. They can be pulled or they can be drawn into wires. So that's the property we talk about, ductile. Another property of metals is that they are sonorous. So we can say they are sonorous. Now, what do we mean when we say metals are sonorous? It simply means that when you hammer a metal, it is capable of making or producing sound. And that is what we mean when we say they are sonorous. So we can simply say that they make a sound. They make a sound when they are hit. So that is what you need to remember. Another property of metals that we can say is that they are lustrous. So they are lustrous. Now, what do we mean when we say metals are lustrous? Well, we simply mean, if we say that metals are lustrous, it simply means that they are shiny. Yeah, sometimes when they are polished, when they are freshly cut, they look shiny, and that's the property. They are lustrous. So we can say that that property lustrous means they are shiny, or if you want, you can say, silvery. Let me say silvery when polished, or freshly cut. So that is what we mean when we say that they are lustrous. Another property that we can talk about is that usually metals have got a high melting and boiling point. Yeah, so we can simply say that they have a high melting. So they have a high melting and boiling point. Now, the only exception in terms of melting point, you are going to find that maybe I can say except mercury. Why am I saying mercury? Well, when it comes to mercury, the melting point for mercury is about negative 39 degrees Celsius. So it has got a very low melting point. But usually metals have got a high melting and boiling point. That is what you need to remember. Another property, this should be the sixth one, another property that we can talk about, maybe let me say the seventh one. You need to remember that metals are solids at room temperature and pressure. So they are, solids at room temperature. So they are solids at room temperature and pressure. And that is what we call as being RTP. So at RTP, metals are usually solids, except one, which we are calling as being mercury. So mercury is normally a liquid at RTP. So at RTP, you're going to find that mercury is going to exist as a liquid. So basically, these are some of the properties that you need to remember about metals. Please watch out for my next video as we continue and talk about alloys and their properties. Thank you so much for watching.